About 25 years ago, my sister and I were driving on a normally busy road, but it was late at night and was deserted. We could both see something flapping on the road up ahead. I asked her what it was and my sister said she didn't know, but that it looked like a black garbage bag. I agreed. It really looked like a bag lying on the road being whipped lightly by the wind. As we approached, it completely changed shape. It went from being quite flat and small to morphing into a fully grown man on a bike. He was just standing there in the middle of the road with his bike. We pulled alongside and asked if he was okay. He nodded but didn't speak. We drove off. We still talk about it because it was the strangest, creepiest thing ever, and we both still can't explain what we saw. I was driving to work, chatting on the phone with my wife to pass the time, 6 to 8 hour drive out to the base from our home, and ahead of me was somebody riding a motorcycle. The road we were on was generally straight, Mojave Desert, but had some unpredictable curves because of the road loosely following a broad wash/lake bed. Like we've discussed, Mojave's desert. The person ahead of me was going between 70 to 90 miles per hour and seemed generally familiar with the road. But then they just sailed straight over the edge of a 45 mph curve going about 80. I made some reactive, disgusted sound and hung up with my wife. I immediately pulled over, called 911 and put them in my pocket, got my trauma kit and put on gloves. I was talking to the dispatcher and explaining what had happened when I step over the bank and see, to my surprise, not a crumpled body in the sage, but a young guy, mid-20s, picking himself up off the ground about 75 feet ahead of me and 15 feet below. He'd been launched from the motorcycle, which was in terrible shape about 30 feet from him. I told him to stay still and went through a quick evaluation. He was basically fine, but super rattled, ended up having a broken collarbone and a mild concussion. Anyway, it's not a ghost story, but I was absolutely certain I'd just seen a person die, and was completely shocked to find him in fine form if a little shaken up. I'm a truck driver, specifically doing shuttle runs for a factory in my city. I run loaded trailers from the factory downtown to a warehouse 20 miles away, where I drop my loaded trailer, exchange it for an empty, and take it straight back to the factory. I run this route 7 to 8 times a night. I'm told it's a diamond in the rough as far as trucking jobs go. Anyway, my route has me cross this rather precarious highway bridge on the return trip. The bridge is only 2 lanes wide with no shoulder. The speed limit on the highway is 70 miles an hour, but this bridge has a steep drop and a sharp curve down to surface level, so the recommended speed to take this curve is 45. A few months ago, around 2 a.m. on Wednesday, I was in the process of rounding this curve when a car was blocking the bridge, and I nearly plowed right into it. The car didn't lose control or smash into anything. There weren't any tire tracks on the pavement, and the car didn't have any damage. Said car was a brand new Mercedes SUV with dealer tags, so it probably wasn't broken down. And nobody was in the car. Whoever was driving must have just decided to come to a complete stop in the middle of this practically blind corner, get out of his car, and walk away. The car couldn't be been there for longer than 20 minutes or so. It wasn't there when I drove past that bridge in the other direction. I didn't see anyone walking along the highway either. I have no idea what was going on with the car. When I unclenched my seat out of my asshole a minute later, I called the cops to get that car, and I never heard anything about it afterward. My brother and I were driving down a super remote road late at night many years ago. Wildlife was common, so we drove slower than was posted. An accident could be fatal on this road. Anyway, it was a particularly dark night, so we had the high beams on and were really concentrating on the journey. We saw it at the same time. It was impossible to miss. My brother hit the brakes and we skidded to a stop in front of the biggest fucking cow on earth. We could have driven under it with room to spare. It was massive, and it stared at us without seeming to see us. The vibe was so creepy. Other cows were around, but they were regular sized. This guy was the king of all bovine. It doesn't seem all that weird when telling the story, but something was just off with this creature. It didn't seem quite natural. I'm probably too late to this thread, but almost 2 years ago my brother and I were making a cross-country journey and were planning on stopping off in Arizona to see some friends. There were highway notices everywhere that there was an escaped convict as soon as we entered Arizona, and it was about 1 a.m., so we were already in a bit of a strange mood. Something about the drive through the desert felt super eerie, and so one of us mentioned it and we started joking about the spooky claims people make while traveling through the area, aliens, skinwalkers, ghosts, etc. While we were having this conversation, this crazy-looking animal ran across the road right in front of us. At first I thought it was a deer, but it looked too wolf-like to be a deer. But it moved like a deer and was too lanky to be a coyote, and it had a long tail like a cougar. And it was big. I slammed on my brakes and it ran off into the brush. We both just started screaming and then laughing. We have no clue what it was. At first I thought cougar with mange after we had a minute to process it, but the more I thought about it, the less sure I was of what it was we saw.